Hello, welcome to another Goji Center video. This one's talking about Godzilla's brilliant plan to win the Titan War. That fucking veil, you goddamn wizard. Let's see how he fucked up badly. Really? On to the video.
What was Godzilla's most impressive high IQ moment? And how could a monumental feat like this go wrong? Today on Goji Center, we'll wind the clock backwards in time, many years back to the Great Titan War, and find out how Godzilla's seemingly most intelligent strategic act ended up backfiring not just on him, but almost causing another mass world extinction. How did this happen? What or who caused it to go wrong? Make sure to watch until the end as we explain Godzilla's high IQ moment gone wrong. For those wondering what genius act turned to blunder, let's return to the film Godzilla Kong, The New Empire. This clip depicts Dr. Eileen Andrews deciphering cave reliefs highlighting one of the episodes of what is known as the Great Titan War. But what is this Great Titan War, and how far back does it go? There's a lot of fragmented evidence throughout the MonsterVerse films that lead to the conclusion that at some point, the great apes were at war with Titanus Gojira. Note what this specific film implies: a bunch of apes at war with one Godzilla. However, we also get a bit of contradictory information in other films. Godzilla vs. Kong, for example, implies that the great apes were at war not only with the G-Man, but other titans like Godzilla. They used this wording in the official novelization likely as some sort of middle ground to suggest that Godzilla may or may not be a species, with some questionable rumors that Toho didn't quite like the idea of there being many Godzillas roaming about in the MonsterVerse, since Toho themselves most of the time have rolled with just one adult Gojira at a time in a single universe, or with an adopted successor. The idea that Gojiras were an entire species in the MonsterVerse began in 2014 in the film Godzilla, with the reveal of specimen 5146 Adam, establishing that there were other Godzillas. This was later built upon with the release of Godzilla Aftershock, giving this creature the alias Dagon and revealing that it was killed by a Muto Prime. It was after King of the Monsters when the writers began to detach from the idea, or de-emphasize the fact that Godzillas were a species, referring to them as titans like Godzilla, but still managed to squeeze in clues that there were actually other Titanus Gojira specimens involved in the Titan War. In GVK, for example, we find Kong run into a lair where other great apes dwelled. In this cave, not only is this skull referred to as a creature that was like Godzilla, but there were other battle axes made with dorsals from clearly other Titanus Gojira specimens. Unless we want to say that these were all ripped out from the G-Man himself back then, which is unlikely given his dorsals back in the day looked different. This is clear evidence that at least some tribes of great apes were at war with many members of the Titanus Gojira species. And the fact that in the GVK trailer it talks about them being the last ones standing in a war that happened long ago, but it goes further. Godzilla Kong suggests that at least some of them were led by the vicious and crafty Scar King. Now, does this mean that there were other great ape tribes in other areas of the Hollow Earth battling it out with other Gojiras? Debatable, and perhaps we'll never find out. But what is 100% confirmed is that Scar King and Godzilla had some beef. Now let's return to this IQ moment we've all been waiting to hear about. Eileen Andrews, who was gracious enough to translate a few etched shapes into a synopsis, tells us that the great apes at some point were defenders of mankind, until one of them, the Scar King, rose to power and expressed a desire to conquer the surface world. But in order to do that, he had to take out the ones who keep things in check. At the time, it was Godzilla, leading his tribe, implying that there were probably other tribes. This specific group, led by Scar King, waged war against the G-Man. The plan being that after Godzilla was neutralized, the great apes would be clear to conquer the surface world. Or, well, try at least. Eileen tells us that after a great battle with the apes, Godzilla was almost destroyed, so he had to resort to other methods. Real quick, are you enjoying this video? Hit subscribe to not miss any more MonsterVerse content. Go check out our merch and hit join so you can watch our videos early and take part in member-exclusive contests and win big prizes. All right, that's it. So, the other methods that Godzilla had to resort to turned out to be initially quite genius. Godzilla, seeing that the apes were positioned in a certain part of Hollow Earth, that being the subterranean realm, found this opportunity to trap them inside. With his atomic breath, Godzilla collapsed the cave entrance, sealing the apes inside. His plan, not just to keep them contained, but to let them die in there. Some of you know where this is going. Putting two and two together, we can come up with a theory, figuring out why Godzilla chose to trap them in this realm. Now, containing them in Hollow Earth Jail was already genius in its own right, but what makes this strategy even more remarkable is who these apes were trapped with. That's right, Shimo had to be also in this subterranean realm, and the apes had nowhere to escape. And it's very likely that Godzilla knew this all along. How do we know this? Well, it's no secret that the G-Man has excellent senses, and Titans like him, more or less, know where other Titans are located. Ghidorah detecting activity happening on Illidomora and changing routes, Godzilla constantly chasing down Scylla using radioactivity as a guide, and Godzilla knowing where to find Kong. Just a few examples of how Titans are able to detect the presence of another Titan. And Shimo would be something very hard to miss for someone like Godzilla. Upon sealing the cave, Godzilla would leave the apes at the mercy of Titanus Shimo, the world-ending Titan with abilities to cause an entire ice age and freeze continents in an alarmingly short amount of time, with the book even implying that Godzilla already knew very well what Shimo was capable of, that being because it was hinted that Shimo was the one who froze Ghidorah. Yes, Godzilla knew that these apes were in good hands, and this Titan War situation was likely to cool down, or so he thought. This is where Godzilla's seemingly strategic act of genius came to almost bite us all in the ass. What he didn't count on was Scar King's relentlessness, ingenuity, and malevolence. Yes, all three were needed to pull off what he was about to, which was to turn the Executioner into his own personal executioner. How the Scar King managed to capture Shimo and turn her into basically a slave is anyone's guess. And we might even try to take a shot at imagining how exactly Scar King managed to capture the biggest Titan in the Monsterverse that we know of so far, without counting this skeleton. What we can almost be certain of is that many of these apes were forced to throw themselves in the line of fire, or ice, in order to overwhelm Shimo with sheer numbers. Many would have perished, and perhaps it took several tries to finally subdue the Ice Titan, saying a lot about how ruthless Scar King was, with his army choosing to face possible certain death versus Shimo instead of facing Scar King's wrath. But after a while, the devious monkey devil figured out a weakness, using a crystal, likely a piece of her own body, to telepathically transfer command and pain to Shimo. With this crystal, Scar King had complete control. Now, figuring out something like this is no easy task, and it may have taken many skirmishes, many defeats, piles of dead apes, and a lucky event where bumping into this object, picking it up, and then figuring out that it has some kind of effect to finally find out how to subdue Shimo. With this instrument of doom, Scar King cemented his control over the remaining apes and waited patiently until an opportunity was presented to finally take over the surface world and fight Godzilla. Now, it is very likely that a big reason why Godzilla decided to go through a drastic change in his form and evolution was because of this, knowing that it wasn't just any threat that he was about to face, but something of monumental proportions and power. Remember, the book already implied that Godzilla knew how powerful Shimo was, and the possibility of facing her again was probably a reason why Godzilla evolved further. That and the fact that he probably knew that the same tribe of apes that almost destroyed him were at it again. Now, the resurgence of Scar King could have gone completely wrong. In fact, this could have ended most of humanity as we know it. Again, this is a topic that we can discuss in the future. But to summarize very simply, causing another ice age, especially in Rio de Janeiro, an area that is predominantly tropical, the local human population would be unprepared to face such a cataclysmic event. In fact, the whole world would not be prepared to face such a disaster. Ground Zero, Rio, would turn into a frigid wasteland, and all the inhabitants of Rio, both flora and fauna, would perish under such harsh temperature changes. The rest of the world would follow in weeks, and surrounding areas in days. That's if we entertain the idea that Shimo instigated an ice age here with just one shot. There are many variables to this, but back to the main topic. The Great Titan War was a vast subject that can be looked at from different angles and with many other explanations. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, after every film, the most epic event in the MonsterVerse timeline becomes even more confusing, with every film adding a bit of story that possibly retcons anything that happened prior. But there's another fun way to look at these things. That's why you watch Goji Center, where we all come together to talk about theories, what-if scenarios, and explanations of things that are already canon in the MonsterVerse. So, subscribe if you haven't, or Godzilla will step on your car.
However, that was Goji Center's video on how Godzilla got all fucked up over there. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!